This is our first annual Hurricane Preparedness Seminar, as requested actually by several new members and some older members too. We're calling on two veterans who you may or may not know, Charlie Batchelor over here and Tom Foster
over here
to my left, and they will hopefully pass on some information that you'll find quite useful. We're heading into hurricane season, as you all know. We want you all to be prepared. Many of you have questions. Many of you know better than we do. But it's a good gathering. And for starters, I'd just like to go right around the table, state your name and maybe your vessel or something, so we know who you are.
But anyway, for folks, there's some folks that have been members here, I think, for some time. And I'm going to kind of ask y'all, because I want to start this, or we discussed it obviously, but I want to start this with a true story that has a very sad ending. And this deals exactly with what we're talking about, and that, of course, is anchoring your boat. Anybody in here, and I asked a few folks at the table over here earlier, does anyone in here know or remember Chuck and Willie Warner? They had an Out Island 41 out on Sea Dock, and I think the name of it was Shangri-La. It's a gray-colored boat, and it's currently over in Duck Creek and has been there for at least a decade. So here's the story. You know, standard hurricanes are coming. You got to need to move your boat side. So Tom's down here doing his little thing, you know, getting my stuff together. And I'm riding out to the end of Sea Dock, which is where my boat was. I'm riding out there on the bicycle. Anybody here know the guy that runs Yachtsman's Campus? Jimmy Sellers. Okay? And I'm deliberately giving names because I want folks to know this is a very true story. Jimmy Sellers and the Warners were very good friends. And they had asked Jimmy if he would, in fact, take their boat out and anchor it if it were necessary. And obviously he had concurred. And so I'm on my bicycle going out to my boat to do whatever it is I needed to do. And as I go by this boat, the Shangri-La, Jimmy says, "Hey, Tom, you're a little more familiar with handling larger boats than I am, because mine's 30-footer. And he says, would you mind taking the boat out? And I says, well, yeah, I mean, I got stuff I'm doing, but yeah, sure, I'll do that, Jimmy. So I get on the boat and fire it up, and we head out over here. Oh, I don't know, probably about 45 degrees out going that way. And look around a little bit. And remind me later, there is a couple of key things I'm going to tell you later. And so if somebody will please ask me, what are the two things to consider when you're anchoring out here in Broad Creek? Ask me that later and I'll tell you. But anyway, we go out there and drop the anchor over. And it's a good size fortress anchor. This is a fortress. It was this size or larger, meaning this is a 37, FX 37, 23, my bad, 23. And they had, I think, a 37, which is significantly larger. Okay, it was sized correctly. It worked okay. We put that out and about 50 feet of rope. And I says, Jimmy, where's the chain? Where's the chafing gear? Where's the stuff we need to protect the boat with? I don't know. I said, now, Jimmy, we don't have to rush that fast. Go look. Let's see if we can find something. So he goes down below naturally and starts digging through, and all of us have boats, and that you got more little cubby holes than you really realize, and unless you're familiar with the boat, you can't find stuff. So I says, Jimmy, I don't want to leave it like this, but we don't have a choice. So that's what we did. I says, what you do the best you can, I'll try to help you with whatever you want me to do. We couldn't find chafing gear, we couldn't find snubbing lines. I mean, it was a mess. So we anchored the boat, came back in. Hurricane happened, went away. That boat ended up sitting on a piling, one of them big ones, across the creek over there. Had a hole in it about like that, up on the port side towards the bow. I know because several days later, the Wanderers came down. I had a dinghy, and I says, Chuck, if you and Willie want to, I'll take you over and see your boat. I says, I feel a little bit responsible about it, but there's nothing else we could have done. And so we went over, and again, they're kind of about my age and pretty emotional. They liked their boat, even though they were doing it primarily for their son. We went over and walked up the docks, the dock going to the house, and it's sitting on a piling about 2/3 of the way up to the shore. Well, it's on the shore, where the sand is, but about 2/3 of the way up the little, if you will, pier. And it took them a while because they had to come in there and lift it off the piling and then took it over to Duck Creek. And it's still sitting over there right now. So I wanted to kind of start with, hey, this is important. For you, if you have a boat and you want to keep it, then you may want to figure out, I probably ought to make that information available to somebody else. And so that's kind of how I wanted to start this. There's a lot of little technical issues that we'll get into. And let's see, I'm going to turn it over to Charlie. You want to go ahead and do the prepare a vessel thing?
Well, yeah, Tom, little history of Tom, too. He grew up on the water from Coruscant.
Outer Banks.
Out of Banks, but you fishing and all that kind of stuff. So he grew up around boats. And he's been a cruiser since 2 decades.
Oh, no, we've been members about 30 years, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tom's done a lot of boating and cruising and has a lot of experience, and there's other people here that we've also learned from. But Tom's getting into, you got to prepare your vessel. It's critical. All my hurricane experience here was with my Freedom 28. But when you got on my Freedom 28, the anchor was already on deck, the chafing gear was already on the lines, preset. Everything was ready for somebody to just deploy it. When you got on my boat and wanted to run the engine, I had you a checklist. On my boat, the raw water for the engine, I intentionally taped with red electrical tape. Go find the red through. So you don't have to really hunt and find stuff. And that's really the whole intent here, is to make sure if your vessel's prepared, what happened to Chuck and Willie's boat, it won't happen. You've got a 95% chance of, with nobody running into you, surviving the storm. We had another club member, he got stuck in Atlanta. He talked his wife into taking the boat out. They got somebody else to help him go take the boat out. Mid-sized boat, no chafing gear. It ended up in the swamp behind the house, and he was lucky. He really had no damage. The data crane lifted it over the house, demasted it, took it to Sail Craft and fixed the minor scratches and stuff. But you gotta prepare your vessel.
Yeah. Let me emphasize
Take
one
off
thing.
all canvas as far as
Take off all the canvas if you can. Yeah, obviously. Just one thing. On one of the hurricanes that we had, and I'm sorry, I don't remember whether it was 2007 or whatever it happened to be, but there was one where we had about 13 or 14 boats that either drug or rubbed through their lines, whatever it was, And we've had some, as a matter of fact, George Hall had a boat that I think was like a 32, give or take something. And it was 33, and it was leaning up against a telephone pole right next to a guy's house across the creek. I mean, it's sitting in the yard against a telephone pole, leaning against it. And so you say to yourself, what does that indicate? Well, to me, that indicates that we have one heck of a tidal surge in here. You know, the water comes up, which kind of might lead to.
We're gonna get into a picture on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I can wait. But the whole point is that the way it is right now out there is not the way it's going to be. And so, you know, as Ron mentioned earlier, you might want to be doing this a little early rather than late. Because when the wind starts picking up, seriously, handling a boat's tough. I mean, it really, there's some stresses there you have no idea. Okay. Go ahead, Charlie. What's your next deal?
Well, part of preparing your vessel is also preparing your ground tackle. 15-pound anchor just ain't gonna do it. I mean, 15-pound anchors really don't work. You take a look at them. So, you really gotta have, in general, Tom has 77-pound anchor on a Freedom 30-ton pilot house. All chain. I'm 60 feet of 3/8 chain, and then I'm 5/8 rope. But I mean, you gotta prepare your ground tackle also. With undersized, you're probably gonna have a problem. I'm gonna pass around 2 pieces of fire hose. What do you chafe with? Most people chafe with fire hose. And one of them's got the rubber inside, everyday anchor, and the rubber inside's not bad. A hurricane anchor, because the boat is always moving, the rubber's gonna generate heat. So I'll pass these around. We'll start with on my boat, and what these guys told me in general for everyday anchoring, you really should have a pound of anchor for boat foot length. You know, you tend to not have a problem anywhere you go if your anchor's at least a pound for every foot of your boat. Mine's running a 25 on 55-pound anchor on a 40-foot Mercy.
Yeah, you're rocking a 25?
Yeah.
That's actually, is it 2.2 pounds per kilo?
Yeah, that's 6 pounds.
Yeah, that's 52 pounds.
Yeah. So I mean, in general, you just never drag. I'm not
Yeah, you want to, you know, like if Charlie's cruising, I've cruised. The deal is that you want to kind of bring your mooring with you. So when you throw that overboard, you feel pretty good. And there have been a couple of places like down there near, Jacksonville. What's the name of that little place, Doug? Little town right there that right across where the bridge is. Huh? Swansboro. Yeah, there's a bridge and a cut that goes through there, and the current is just, you know, chewed the bottom up so bad that my anchor would not dry or would not hold. And again, I'm a little bit practiced and kind of, it's still, I couldn't get it to hold. I wasn't comfortable with it, and you know, it's one of those, we'll move. And so that's just what you do. Yep. Okay.
The other thing here on Ron Starr's bullet is following club guidelines. One of the club guidelines is everybody should have a hurricane plan. And in that hurricane plan, you should say, who is your backup person that's going to take your boat out if you're unable to do it? So, who doesn't have a hurricane plan? It's okay to raise your hand, because he'll eventually find out that you don't have one.
Usually, when we have a new member, always now when we have a new member come in, we ask for 4 documents, one of them being a hurricane plan. If you don't have a hurricane plan put together, go to the members section on the website under wet and dry slips, and that form is right there at the very top. You can print that out, fill it out by hand. You can email it to me, or you can put it in an envelope, stick it in the slot in the office, and we keep them on file by slip. So we do have, you know, a record of who's going to be looking after your boat if you're, you know, stuck in Italy or wherever you may be, other than here in the United States, come time. So please do that if you don't have. I'm surprised that so many raised their hands, actually. But, some of our older members, maybe back in the day, didn't do that, but it's actually required these days.
I need to update mine because it's not updated to this point.
Please do that. You do that today.
One of the other,
I ain't getting into that. I ain't getting into that.
one of the other things is there are some members here that have smaller vessels. And it used to be 27 feet and under didn't have to leave the dock. Now, hurricane, every boat's out of the water. Either out on anchor or up on a trailer. One of the things that happened the last time in Florence was a bunch of boats on trailers, but all the boats on trailers weren't strapped to the trailer, and the trailer wasn't fixed to the ground. So we had boats and trailers moving, boats coming off trailers. So if you really intend on taking your boat out of the water on a trailer, make sure you correctly secure that.
Yeah, let me interject something just real quick on what I would call a smaller boat, 21, 25, 23, whatever. Somewhere along in there, I have actually seen this, a husband-wife team. He was physically pretty large, and she was similar, and they took their 20-something or other out there, and they had a Danforth anchor that is in the 10 to 15 pound range. And by the way, a hooker anchor is not an anchor. Just, you've heard the term of the brand Hooker. Please, the shaft on that will bend so easily. And it's the Danforth style, but it's junk. Anyway, I saw this husband and wife team go out there and kind of find a spot. And he takes a wad of rope line and this anchor and throws it overboard. And then he come, and I was in a dinghy, and he said, "Would you take us in now?" And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me! What the hell are you doing? We didn't back down on it. He didn't try to do anything other than it's overboard. My square's filled, and I've seen that. I've actually talked to the folks that did that. Okay, next story.
Let me add something about boats on trailers. Before we bought this adjacent property, the only spot we had was the property beyond the gate, which is on higher ground. And a lot of us that were trailer sailors would park our trailers out there. You definitely want to strip the boat of all canvas, your bimini, your foresail, and anything else loose that you might have. You want to strap the boat to the trailer, and you want to park it out there. And we usually have somebody out there. Chesley, I think, helped on the Florence episode, directing traffic and all that. We now have the annex, so we have more space. That's higher ground, so we can park trailered boats up there. But you definitely got to strip the canvas, and you definitely want to strap the boat to the trailer. That's your best bet. Or take it somewhere else. Take it home with you, or do something with it. But get it off. It's got to be off the property.
Just one thing. During Florence, a couple of people put plastic over their boom and over their boat. Don't do that because it just makes a big sail and it pushed the boats around like 180 degrees almost. I mean, don't try to protect it from the rain because it'll catch the wind.
We did have one boat that was left, I think 4 or 5 for Florence that somehow were left in the harbor. One being a Catalina 22 that was probably about 8 or 9, 10 slips up on a dock. And after Florence, if you weren't here, we had about between an 8 and a 10 foot surge, storm surge here. It's marked down, if you go down by a tool room, you see a mark on the side of the wall and also one in the bathhouse, so you got a feel for how much surge we actually had. But that Catalina 22 found its way to the roof of the barbecue, and that's where we found it the next day. So that gives you an idea of the power of the surge and the reason that we got to get all these boats out of the harbor. Very important.
I think we had 6 that stayed in and 1 survived.
I think you're right. I think that's
1 survived, and yet that's because he had it tied all the way across. It's the only boat that survived. We had 5 totals out of 6.
Okay, sorry.
I got a question. If you're on a trailer, should you try to anchor the trailer or not?
You should try to anchor the trailer so at least it won't move around. But hopefully now that we have the other property out there, I doubt if we're gonna have another 10-foot surge, but on the 10-foot surge, the stuff up closest to the road didn't move at all. You know, some of the stuff closer to the gate floated over on the golf course and stuff like that, but right up by the road on that 10-foot surge, those boats were all on. So, again, part of preparing the vessel and ground tackle and all that, that does include trailable boats. Okay. If you don't know the policy, it's a named storm, hurricane named storm in Craven County. Not Pamlico County, but if they say Pamlico County, I'm getting my boat ready because it doesn't mean it may go, 15 degrees to the left and then it's in Craven County. My boat will be out if it's a named storm coming this way. Some of this we've talked about, but some of this, Tom started to bring up a point. And a lot of articles of hurricane stuff kind of recommend 10-to-1 minimum scope. Normal scope, I'm between 5 and 7, depending on where I'm at and what the bottom is. But I'm never less than 5.
Does everyone pretty much understand scope? You know what he's talking about, correct?
Well, scope is the distance from the anchor on the bottom to the water line, not the bow, the water line below your bow. That's the measured scope. That's what you measure. So if I'm 10-to-1 and I'm in 10 feet of water, I've got minimum 100 feet between the top of the water and my anchor. You then add whatever you want to your route, but you should have at least whatever your minimum is at the water to the anchor hook on the bottom. Question?
Do you account for the surge?
We're gonna account for the surge because most people will go out of here, average depth is 8 to 9 feet, and they'll 10-to-1, they'll put out 80, 90 feet. You add 10 feet to that, you're now less than 5-to-1 on your scope at the max water. So you should at least account for 5-6 feet surge in here anytime.
And just remember, when Charlie says add something, you need to add from the water line up to your to your bow roller. You know, maybe 2 foot on or 3 foot on a 23, 22 foot boat, and maybe 5 or 6 on a 40 foot boat. You know, just kind of depends. But like folks say, especially at a hurricane, having either anchor rode or anchor chain in the locker is not helping you very much for the hurricane. You know, if being in the locker is okay, well, I could have left it at the store.
Yeah, if you got it, you should be using it.
Yeah, the other part is that you don't want to put out 300 feet out there, and because your swing, your radius is going to be significantly different than what other folks are planning on. Most folks are going to go out there with about 150 to 175 feet, something like that. Again, depending. And here's something that just occurred to me. How many of you folks would be in favor of putting a marker buoy over your anchor or anchors? Who thinks that's a good idea? Okay, we've got some of those. All right, let's talk about it just a little bit, okay? I, again, have experienced, not me, but anybody here remember Bill Hamilton? Bill and Myra Hamilton? Okay, so I'm just saying these names so folks won't think I'm lying. Because, if my mouth is open, then it may be. But anyway, Bill was a retired high school principal, and he didn't have a lot of skills as far as boating. And I went out one time with him, and we got the anchor up. It was right out here. And he had a 30-foot Catalina. Got the anchor up right out there, and then he backed up over the float. And so we're sitting there. We got the anchor up, and he got backed into it anyway. He backed into the float. So I sit there for a while, and I said, "Well, Bill, you going overboard?" "Oh, I can't swim." I'm thinking, this sucks. I ain't liking this a lot. I have been suckered. And so, yes, Tom did go overboard with a damn knife and cut that off. So, my point is that you probably really don't want to put a marker out there. Again, that's entirely up to you folks, whatever you want to do. But let me ask you something again. Let's just say that you're prepared. And so you take your boat out and you anchor it. And you say, I'm going to put a float out here. Not a big one. I've got, I don't know, maybe a crab pot float, whatever it might be. And because I know somebody that has some of those. And you, Charlie? Okay. Anyway, what happens is for the first day or so, it's calm. If you got your boat out there a little early, it's calm. And the wind's going to change directions. And the boat could very easily drift over your marker and get it caught in the prop. I've seen it happen. When you're cruising up and down, you see the new cruisers up and down the intercoastal. You see the new cruisers, and they say, "Oh yeah, let me put a marker out there so folks won't get too close to me." Well, tides change every 6 to 8 hours, depending on where you're at. When that happens, the boat's going to swing around. You don't have any control over it, especially at night when you're asleep. So my point is, you really want to think about, is that something I really need to have? The marker buoy for the anchor? If you feel like it is, help yourself. I'm just saying I have seen where it's turned out in a negative manner. Okay, I didn't mean to get rambling off on that, but it is important.
That's a good point, because a lot of people will still use them, and they're not good, they're not bad, but you got to take into account if you're going to do that, you better scope it correctly to what the tide surge is going to be. Because if you put it on 8 or 9, 10 feet of line, when the water's up to 14 feet, guess what's under the water pulling on your ankle? So if you're going to use them, make sure you got
Of course,
enough line.
You want me to be quiet? You want me to be quiet?
No.
Oh, heck, I'll do that. That way I get paid more and talk less. Yeah.
The other thing, here's Blackbeard, we're going to anchor. Most of the people anchor somewhere right out here. You'll have a few that go around and anchor in Goose Creek, and it's 7, 8 feet. It's not bad. It's just not visible from the club, So your boat's going to be out there 5, 6, 7 days. You don't know really who you can't see, and they know you can't see them, so they may go visit your boat.
Yeah, let me hop in real quick on the if you will, the marker thing, but for a different reason. And that is, we were talking about your boat moving around, but earlier I had mentioned that I wanted to kind of come back to two very key things in my mind about anchoring out here. And that is, you can go out early and pick your spot. This is the perfect spot. I've been out here. This is sand, and there's sand out there, and there's clay out there. But you go out and pick your perfect spot. If you go out early, you can do that. If you go out late, you can pick your neighbors. And you say to yourself, I don't know who that person is next door. Am I comfortable with the way they anchor? If I don't know who they are, maybe I'd be better off doing something a little bit different.
Why'd you look at John when you said
Well, he was the person I most recently had a conversation with. But seriously, that is that's kind of my approach is that I don't know all of y'all folks and how well you anchor, And I'd feel comfortable anchoring perhaps next door to him or him or him, only because I've done it numerous times, tens anyway, and some more than that. But my point is, I understand that they know this is how much scope I need to put out, this is how the tide's gonna work tonight, but I don't know that you don't know that. And you may have 150 feet of load out, and we're in 5 feet of water, or 7 feet, in my case, but enough so that we've got a significant difference in boat movement. The other thing that you need to kind of think about, and I'm awful glad that worked, and that is there is a significant difference in how a boat responds to weather, wind, and waves between having rope and having chain. It is a totally different animal. Your rope only deal, and when I say rope only, I'm talking about 30, 40, 50 feet of chain. If you've got another 100 foot of line out there, you're basically rope only, back and forth. And you're going to hunt back and forth. And the more you hunt, the more strain your boat's going to be sideways to the wind more. And even when it's pointing into the wind, it has a significantly less amount of wind resistance. When it's sideways, coming across like that until it gets to the end, and then when it gets to the end, it makes its turn. That's a pretty significant jerk or snap on your, and which brings me to, okay, test question, folks. What percentage of stretch do we have in a normal 3-strand rope? It's a test question. Anybody feel free to answer.
10%.
How much?
10.
I'd say 15.
I'm gonna say 20.
15 is, I think, if you will, the standard, at least for old people. But no, that's what I do remember was kind of 15%. But we'll go with 10 for you and 15 for him, or 20, whatever. But the point is that it's gonna absorb some of that energy. And the catenary, remember when you're using all chain, the chain weighs something, pretty significant amount. And it's and rather than going straight to the anchor, unless there's a heck of a lot of stress from the boat to the anchor, it's going to be dragging along the bottom and gradually curve up. That's called a catenary. And that, of course, acts the same way as the stretch in the line. And since I brought that up, let's talk a little bit about, I'm an all chain guy. Do me a favor, grab the center of that loop right there.
This is his,
This is my bridle
for hurricane.
for hurricanes. All right, yep. This part right here goes over the chain. I have a U-bolt that holds the chain into this,
So it won't drop off.
so it won't pop out or snap out. As you can see, I've got it with chafing gear. I've got chafing gear coming off the front of the boat, and then I've got chafing gear going around the whatever those things are. Yeah, the chocks. There we go. I used to know those boat things. But anyway, so you can see that this is probably
3/4 line.
it's 3/4 line, but it's probably what, 30 feet long, maybe?
Wait.
Yeah. So now that's what I use for hurricane.
How do you actually attach your line to the chain? Wouldn't you have to be in your dinghy to attach it?
No, you figure out where you want to, where the latter part, well, let's say this, the bitter end, the end of your chain that's going to be because you got the chain off. And as you're getting out, okay, I've got 180 feet out, I've got 150 feet out, and when you get to that point, you say, okay, I need to put this on there, and then I'll let it out another 30 feet. Does that make sense?
So you're able to see your chain is attached to your boat, but it's sagging, because you're not having.
Yeah,
You're not having
this hooks on your chain anywhere you
down.
want to hook it. So if you're anchored in 6 feet of water, you may hook it at 40 feet of chain mark. When you're in a hurricane, he may be clipping this on at 140 feet of chain mark. But you can put this on your chain, and as you use this out over the front when you let your chain out.
Yeah, that goes out over the front, so there's nothing in between it. It's just comes right back through the chocks and to the cleats. And then on this one, this is an everyday, thank you very much, I'm going to Cape Lookout, or I'm going down to Minnesota, or wherever I'm going. And this is the what I use for chain for that.
For every day.
Yeah. And I probably, every day, I'd probably use about 8 or 10 feet of, they call this a snubber.
Yep.
Tom, your chain is still attached to your boat.
It is.
Of course.
Right, yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, yeah, okay, I'd have 8 feet of this, we'll just say this. I'm out here at, down here at Minnesota, and I've tied this off. I can adjust it basically if I need to for longer, more or less. But, and then I let the chain out so that it will hang,
Right.
and you want to leave an extra couple of feet. And that's the reason that I have this chafing stuff here. So that's where the
Chain comes through.
chains,
Chain
yeah,
chafes.
because it won't chafe. It is going to rub, but it won't chafe.
So that's the end that you put on your chain, right?
That is correct,
This
yes.
is the end he puts on the chain, anywhere he wants to be back.
It just hooks on.
You got this kind of bridle, snubber, I use this kind of hook. But it goes over and I'll buy it off.
With wire.
Some line or wire, just so it does not,
Yeah,
chain goes slack, you don't want your snubber, drop it off. Right.
Charlie, why don't you mention bowsprits?
Yep.
How your plunge, my opinion, I don't have a bowsprit, but
I've got a bowsprit, and normally
to avoid that,
you do not want to storm conditions anchor your boat off the bowsprit. Because I can't think of what you call a little metal brace. Because that can't support the whole load. All it's doing is help keeping your forestay and everything else somewhat together and the load somewhat equal. I'll sit here and go, I've got 2 chocks. I'll come out under the bowsprit. As Tom said, I let out a lot. And then this will come through with chafing, this is my every day, through with chafing gear to my foredeck cleats. But you don't normally anchor your boat with a bowsprit over the wall.
What is
You
that,
better bring it off the side.
what is that fixture called that you're looking at there?
This is a snubber.
Piece of metal.
I don't know.
chain
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, they're pretty common. What's
Yeah,
the
they're
yeah.
common. Yeah.
Just order a chain hook, right?
Yeah, no, I think a chain hook is it looks like a hook, and it does the same thing, but not necessarily for a hurricane.
This is more of like a marine chain hook. You go look up chain hook, you'll get what they use for tractors and trucks and all that all the time. And some people use those. I'm not so sure. They tend to have a tendency to stay on hook to the chain.
Okay.
Good info.
Mantles sells. Mantles, people that.
You mentioned before there is some stretch in the
Yep.
line,
Yep.
like 10-15%. So if you are on the chain, you don't have to stretch anymore, do you? I mean, you
Okay,
lose some
remember,
of the stretch.
okay, let's, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that's super good question. Okay, two things. One is there's catenary in the chain, okay, which is obviously where it comes out of the water. It doesn't come straight up. It doesn't come to right underneath the boat and come straight up. Depending on the amount of pressure is depending on how much it's going to lift that chain up. The other thing is that's the reason I've got about 30 or 35 feet of the fairly heavy snubber line, and that has the 15% elasticity. So when I'm figuring out how much additional chain I need to let out to kind of cause a little bow underneath it, I want to add at least 15 to 25% so that when this stretches, I'm not putting any jerk or on the chain itself. Does that make sense? And that provides some of the elasticity for the end of the run on when the boat's hunting back and forth like that. That provides some shock absorbency for the boat and the anchor, because you don't want to pull the anchor out. Okay, what else?
Yeah, this is in general what your catenary is with your own chain. Your road will pretty much be straight. A little catenary on 50 feet of chain, but not much. And this does act as a big shock. The other thing we want to talk about, go ahead, you got a question?
So the recommendation is 150 foot of chain?
Out here?
Yeah.
Are you all chain?
Not right now, I'm not. I'm 50 foot of chain and 150 foot of rope.
Are you gonna cruise? If you're gonna cruise, you might as well buy your chain now. I mean, I'm just a serious like me. If you're going to the Bahamas or you're going anywhere like to Florida with the Keys and the coral, rope is totally, it's good for a night, maybe. Yeah, I mean, seriously, it rolls back and forth. You can actually see it because the water's so clear, and you see it roll across.
But out here in a hurricane.
Oh, out here, yeah. I mean, you could do your 50 feet. You could do another. Personally, I would do another 150 feet, maybe, of rope, and then you want to have a little bit left. And when you go to all chain, and I know I'm jumping back and forth. When you go to all chain, one thing that you want to do, in my opinion, is attach a rope, a good size rope, something like that, or maybe bigger, to your boat, where you would normally tie the end of, or attach the end of your chain, and then have about 10 feet of this rope, so that if you ever, let's say you've got a boat dragging down on you, or you've got a tug kind of coming towards you, and you say, I've got to leave, and I can't pull my anchor back up. So what you can do is let everything out. You won't have time to go get a wrench, but you can take a knife and cut that rope. So that way you drop your anchor, and your chain, and say, well, at least I didn't lose the boat. Does what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a recommendation. That if you go all chain, which is what I have, then I have about 10 feet of rope at the end that never comes out unless I have to abandon the thing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I did. I tried, first 2 years, I'm gonna say this picture. First 2 years, I tried 2 anchors and 2 rows and 2 40-foot.
Oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna get into that.
2 40-foot section, of chain. And the reality is, so I've really got a boat right here. And I got an anchor over here, and I got an anchor over here. And the reality is, the boat's going to end up doing this. So you know it's going to end up rubbing against each other. You'll come up all twisted up.
Yeah, let's talk a little.
Yeah, let me finish this
Okay.
thought. So don't want to do that. So what I do now with my chain, and I'm probably going to have at least 100 more feet of chain, but with my 50 feet now, I will still attach. This is the boat. Here's the water. I will still attach a second loose road down to my chain. Because if I lose my primary road, I'm at least still hooked up on one that's not under tension, and it'll theoretically help save the boat. And they are, again, off different sides of the boat. They're not both coming through the same chop.
Charlie, can
And that's what I've done the last 3 years on.
Just a second. How many folks have talked to somebody and you have a plan about how you're going to anchor? Meaning, are you going to use one anchor? Are you going to use 2 anchors? Do you have an affinity for those? Are you going to use 4 or 5? And the reason I ask that is that we have, and engineers are a special people. We know that. We have one person, an engineer. He's still a club member, has a boat out there on ADOC. And his approach is he has 3 large Danforth style anchors. And they run to a center point, a tie point in the center. You're out maybe, we'll just say 100 feet in each direction. They come to a center tie point, and then he attaches his anchor chain or line to that center tie point. So there's no right or wrong, or you want to do this or you want to do that. But how do you anchor now? Do you use 1 anchor? Do you use 2 anchors off at 45 degrees? Do you use 2 anchors in tandem, meaning one and then another one a little further out on the same line? what do y'all use? What's the considered, go ahead, sir.
Well, I've never actually tried it, but I'm set up to do tandem anchoring with 2 anchors.
Okay,
And we're gonna get into how he does his 2 anchors and that stuff. I wanna go over first direction and
okay,
what happens when you're anchoring.
okay.
Because one of the things you really need to know is the storm gonna pass to the east, which generates a big north flow when it gets close to us, or is it gonna pass to the west and you're gonna get it coming from this direction.
Yeah,
But
good.
regardless of where it goes, when you anchor your boat out here the day before, you could be anchoring 180 degrees opposite what the max sustained wind direction is going to be. So we always try to, okay, the storm's going to go east. We always try to intentionally set and back down an anchor as far to the northerly direction as we can. And then we'll set our second anchor right here where it's going to naturally pull where it's pretty much is. But if you got tandem anchors and you can preset one into the northerly direction, you should do that versus just putting one here and one here, because the wind's going to come opposite.
Are you saying the windward anchor should be?
You should try to set your anchor where you're going to get the best use out of the max wind direction.
Yeah, to kind of go back just a little bit on the different types of anchors and that kind of stuff, everybody in here, I'd imagine, has a different type of anchor, probably. Do we have a fair number of Danforths? Okay, all right.
Are you including the aluminum anchor too? You say Danforth?
Yeah, that style. Yeah, that style, because they're extremely, in a single direction, they're extremely efficient. I mean, they will flat do the job. The problem is, just as Charlie's pointed out, that you may be setting it in the wrong direction. And if you're using a hooker as the anchor brand, it's instead of turning and digging in, it's just got the standard one of those deals, a fortress anchor that's attached on the front of the boat, just on the side. And I've got about 35 feet of chain attached to it. Ideally, if I were going to anchor out here all the time, I might consider cable. Because when you think about it, I don't know if y'all, anybody here gone down and done clubfoot and ended up in the mud in clubfoot? Okay.
Done what now?
Ended up not in, had a lot of mud on your anchor.
Oh, yeah.
In clubfoot?
Oh, yeah. I think you
You
said
have?
end up in the mud.
No. Well, yeah, but you anchored in the mud because you didn't know it was down there. Got it. So when you pulled the chain up, you had a glob about like that, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So if you can imagine how much resistance that puts to try to pull it down deeper and deeper into the mud. Does that make sense?
It does.
That cable cuts right through it.
Right.
See, of course, it doesn't have the open links in it, and it's cut right down. It's much more efficient, but part two is grabbing that cable and trying to pull the anchor that's on the end of it up is kind of tough. So the options you've got is to put a little a secondary line on that, specifically a loose line designed to help you pull the anchor up. But I just wanted to point out that that's, go ahead.
I think there's at least 10 feet here. I think they recommend at least 10 feet of cable. This is like twisted cable. You can get the telephone pole, guy strand, lightly twisted cable. This actually was ordered online and shipped. You can go over to Duck Creek, and Tyler at Majestic Rigging will make you a cable if you want it. You know, there's some places in North Raleigh that make cable.
In terms of why you would have a cable and how you would use it.
Well, you use it.
It's wearing.
So you're saying to disconnect the anchor from the chain and put on a cable?
Yeah.
Well,
That's what people do.
Yeah.
Because your anchor's hooked to the chain with a shackle. I mean, this is where you hook your chain, and this other end goes to the anchor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
And again, these are just different options that some folks
some
do.
people do, yeah.
So if you put a cable like this, you still need the same length in terms of the chain, still that 150?
No, because you're not adding additional weight. What you want is the ability to cut through the mud or clay and let the anchor work its way down.
So you don't consider that when you're looking at the scope? You don't consider the length of the cable?
Well, it could be.
This would count as your scope length. You know, it's not in addition to that.
So this
It's
is
part of
something-
your total scope length.
Okay, but, okay.
This is something that you would only do as part of your hurricane preparation.
Probably, yes.
Because otherwise, you'd have to you'd have a problem with your anchor windlass.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
That's right.
And it becomes a mess, yeah. And see, that's the reason that I say, in my case, I've got my primary anchor, which is the Rockna, the 33 kilo Rockna and the other junk with it. And then I attach about 5 feet up from the chain that attaches to the Rockna, about 5 feet up. I put a shackle on there, and then I run about a 25 or 30 foot piece of chain out and attach it to that type anchor right there, the Fortress. And I'll drop the Fortress over and back down on it, and see, I've got 25 feet, which during a normal time out here is plenty to reach the bottom. And then I'll drop the other anchor over and start backing the boat up, and everything's cool. And it doesn't have to be taut between the two anchors. It can be loose. And let me give you an example of.
You just want to make sure you get both anchors stacked and
Yeah.
back down.
Yeah. And the last time Charlie was out there with me, last time I had the pretty large Rockna, and had it overboard, and I also had my Fortress, and my boat ended up moving, and I didn't understand why. And then after I got out there and started to try to pull the anchor up, the primary anchor, which is the first one I get to with the windlass, I had a tree stump this big around. So the aerodynamics or the efficiency of the anchor became non-existent. It's just like a pebble, or a big old boulder. And so easily pulled. So I was extremely fortunate by having the second anchor in there that it did, even though I moved a little bit, as soon as that, took the slack out of it because you don't really know exactly which position you're going to be in, which direction the wind's going to be blowing from. So anyway, that kind of saved my boat. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Why, and I'll say this, because he's not here, but we got a new member that talked to the Fortress engineers last week. And these anchors, you can set them 40 degrees, you can move this and you get a 45-degree bind. The Fortress engineers do not recommend with cable 45 degrees. He said it'll go down and find the mud, and then the tips just keep hopping. They don't bite. He said if you got cable, stick to your 30 degrees because you'll get more bite this way than if it's at a steep run.
Charlie,
Yeah.
how about with chain, is that with the Fortress? Is
45 is good.
45 is recommended
With the mud.
during a hurricane? Otherwise, something less.
Right. He said the cable, it does, it just helps it slice right through the bottom and it hops when it gets to hard clay.
How do you feel about the Fortress Danforth versus a galvanized Danforth?
Well, galvanized Danforths are fine as long as you know they got the correct tensile and they're really a quality Danforth anchor.
Yeah, there's another brand of these called Guardian. Are you familiar with those?
No.
They're similar in shape and color and size and weight. The difference is that the shaft, instead of being tapered, I think that's shaft, being tapered is a single bar. And they're also pretty good quality. The negative to these things specifically is if you've ever been out to Cape Lookout and you've tried to anchor when the current's really running, it just drifts, it just floats.
It's not.
No, I've heard.
They'll fly.
Yeah, exactly.
They just
Yeah, well,
stay in-
drifts or floats, and that's maybe synonymous, but yeah, your point is exactly. And it's very difficult to control. They're extremely efficient. That anchor is more efficient than the Danforth, although they're both very, very efficient compared to, we'll just say, a Bruce.
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
Okay, so what else do y'all feel like we ought to talk about? I mean, I don't know anything. I didn't know anything when I started, but what?
Good.
Tom, do you know if there's any chafe gear in the rope room now?
I'd have to ask the Vice Commodore.
Hose from eBay or the internet or whatever. The one piece of fire hose that didn't have the rubber on it was actually the outer sheathing to the one that had the rubber. And normally you'll take it and pull that outer sheathing off of it and use the outer sheathing because it lets the water through, and when it's stormy and water coming over the bow and all that, that water
I'll take it home.
is like a cooler. It keeps everything cold versus solid rubber or some other thing solid inside.
I also,
Well, we usually have fire hose in the rope room, laying on the floor. On the way out of here, I haven't been in there in a while, but I'll check for that. And if not, I'll see that we can, that we will get some in there, so.
Yeah, does a local fire department, donate that?
They usually donate them when they get to that point.
Yeah, every year or so, it's kind of like you test it and.
That's right.
Well, we'd have Bill and Doug bring it, but they're not full-time firemen anymore.
Here you go.
Because you don't need the 6-inch hose. You need the stuff that'll fit through your chalks.
Well, if you're gonna use the 6-inch hose, one of the good point here, if you're gonna use the 6-inch hose, I cut it. And I'll make sure it's about the diameter I want, fit through my chalks, and then I'll zip tie it back together, or sew it back together. But
Zip
one
tie
of
it
the,
That's, perfect example.
there you go, right there. That's a big fire hose. But one of the things I wanted to make sure you really understand, and Tom's done this, when you put chafing gear on your road, tighten it up to the road, because you don't want the road sliding through the chalk, sliding your chafing gear down the road, and now you're not chafed. So when you get your road set and everything, and then you put your chafe gear there, make sure that chafe gear is fixed,
And
so it stays in that position, because it'll move off the.
Yeah, and just for what it's worth, what I do is I take the tie wraps, obviously, and then run them underneath one of the lays of the 3-strand rope, so that basically it'll hold it in place.
so question. Not all road is created equal.
That is correct, and I'm glad you said that, because what is this?
Road?
Yeah, well, what kind is it?
New England? Nylon.
He's right. It is New England road. It is a good quality. The stuff that John Day gets over here, he may have improved the quality. Used to, if you put it out here on the dock lines, it'd be just like a stick. I mean, a broomstick after a while. It didn't take long for it to just harden right up, and you could, and New England rope, or one of the better quality ropes, will not do that. I'm glad you asked.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I'm a trailer sailor. Can you, the day or two before landfall, I imagine there's probably a fair amount of business going on here. Is there any organization, basically, anybody in control of managing the slips and so forth to get boats out most effectively?
I will defer to the gentleman over here on my right.
I'll try and answer that. As you can imagine, it's a bit of a cluster on that day, or the day before, or the day before that. So my best advice to anybody that's pulling out is to get here early, ahead of time. Don't watch the track of the storm intensely, And when you have a reasonable assurance that it's heading our way, there's no harm in pulling your boat out.
Right.
So try and get ahead of the game. You don't want to wait until 24 hours prior to landfall or whatever, or even to Craven County declaring a warning. You want to get out as soon as possible.
Yeah, another thing in that same vein is that for the folks that are going out and anchor, if you're concerned about, well, I've got to take the boat out, how am I going to get back? There are, in fact, numerous volunteers that justify having their power boats over here so that they can come out and pick you up and bring you back. They won't deliver food, but they'll bring you back.
And I was just gonna say, towndoc.net, their hurricane coverage.
Pretty good.
He puts in, along with the forecast track, he puts in, I think, Florida State does a composite of all the main forecast models. So he puts in the track, and it shows eight or 10 different tracks.
Right.
And that just really helps, because once they all start coming together.
And they also reference the NOAA track on that site.
Yeah.
They have good information on hurricane track.
There's another site that I use. If you just Google spaghettimodels.com, it'll take you to Mike's weather page, it's called, and they show all the different composites, all the different models.
And you put that URL in your little sheet, didn't you?
Yes.
Your spaghetti.
Yeah, it's in this little handout. So yeah, I highly recommend that one. That is generally kept very much up to date. It's got all the national weather service stuff.
Can I, if you'd be able to put that on
Charlie, we've been talking.
an email to send it to all the members?
Have we fulfilled the requirements of obligation? We've been talking for an hour.
Question.
Is it feasible to create a storm mooring field out there?
I don't think
screw things into the ground.
I don't think that we're authorized to do that. Again, that's just a Tom doesn't think, and he damn sure doesn't know. So somebody else might.
Ron doesn't know either.
But I believe that we have had previous club members that have said, you know, I have some additional disposable income, and I'd like to put one of those out there. And of course, it'll say my boat name on it. And they tried to do that and couldn't get authorization from either FEMA or whomever it might have been. I have no idea. Tampa, that's the one. Shoot them rascals. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Y'all know anything about using a skillet?
Yes.
On a rope road?
Yep. I am so glad you asked that. In addition to being intelligent and attractive young man, you know stuff. Okay, let me talk to you about Kelly's real quick, since you asked. And this is going to be another story, and it's a true story, and it happened in the dark of night. Okay, so here's the deal. My wife and I are out there at Cape Lookout. Nice place, but you know what happens? The tide turns and runs back and forth if you're down in that little hook down there. And so we, at the time, had a Cal 31 with a fairly sharp fin keel. We're out there. I've got a 35-pound anchor, which I figured was sufficient. Got that down with a half-inch line and probably 25, 30 feet of chain. Well, I've got 150 feet of rope out. And so the tide changes. And when that happens, my line got wrapped around the back of the keel. And of course, like just about any time you've ever been out of Cape Lookout, there's a fair number of folks out there. And so, 2 o'clock in the morning, bam, I hit somebody. I don't have any clothes on, but I hop up on deck. I'm just proud as I can be, but part 2 is, I'm unhappy. Why am I doing this? Well, because my boat ran into another boat. And of course, the first thing the person said was, your boat ran into me. And I'm thinking, hell, I got good stuff out there. That ain't happening. So pretty soon I figure out I'm pointing in the wrong direction. I'm sideways to the current because it just so happened that the boat would balance exactly rudder, keel, sideways to the current. More drag. And so I have got some strain on that anchor that was unreal because I'm just dragging right on down, and I'm thinking, this is going to be, what's that game where you do the little pinball? I don't want to do that. So I'm going to pass on a little something that worked out for me. I hopped down, I dove overboard. Of course, fortunately, thank you, Lord, there was a lot of moonlight. Dove overboard, got underneath the boat. With enough moonlight I could see, it was right up behind the back of the keel, sideways. Pulling and pulling to try to get some pressure. Couldn't do it. It's just not possible. So I thought about it. Well, I'm too damn cheap to cut the line. So I figured, okay, how can I do this? And what I did was I grabbed another line, and of course my wife is shouting encouragement, dummy. And yeah, she is. But I grabbed another line, dove over on, if you will, the anchor side of the boat, and tied a rolling hitch on that line, and came back out of the water, tied the rolling hitch off on a cleat, and eased off on the other line.
Put the tension now.
Now the tension is transferred to the other side of the boat. Doggone, now I'm able to swing into the current. And the line gets loose, and I'm able to just kind of pull it right back in. And I was thinking, how did I think of that at 2 or 3:30 in the morning? And
Cold water.
Pardon me?
Cold water. Yeah.
It wasn't that bad, thank the Lord. But anyway, so Kelly, if you go out to Cape Lookout, that's something you want to use. About 15 feet down, 15 to 20, anything below the depth of your keel. Because that way, your line won't get caught in the keel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Well, I was wondering about more for a hurricane.
It will help. It will help. But out here, generally speaking, you've got 10 feet. Generally speaking. So that's going to basically, when you let that out, you're going to let it out more than 10 feet. So that's going to basically, until the wind starts picking up, you're going to be pushing your stuff down in the ground. I mean, in the mud.
And usually out here, unless it's not normal, you're not going to be anchoring 180 degrees different than the storm. You're usually out here 100 degrees, 120, before they come. That's about what the prevailing winds are. So you're really not going to totally flip. You know what I'm saying? But look out you will. One other thing real quick, and this not necessarily hurricane, but we talked about anchoring in the direction of the strong wind. We had 5 boats go to lookout last summer. And 2 of us said, oh, it's supposed to blow 20, 25 out of the southwest tomorrow night. So 2 of us intentionally set our anchor off the southwest. The other 2 just went in, and I think it was more like east. Anyway, went in and just set a normal set based on the current wind condition. And those 2 boats dropped. So, I mean, even at lookout sometimes, if you know you're going to get a storm or the wind's going to pick up for one night, you should try to set your anchor.
I don't understand what you're saying in terms of setting your anchor, because your boat's swinging around the anchor. How are you setting your anchor in a particular direction?
Yeah, that's what I was going. Will you just follow the wind? I mean,
No.
I think you've got one in your back pocket.
I got a big one. I'm going to scratch because it's big. This is southwest. This is east. And this is where, when you come in, your normal shank is right here. I'm setting my boat right here, the anchor's right there, the shank and the boat and the chain and everything are all aligned. I'm going over here and setting my anchor and intentionally bringing my boat back around and backing down this direction. So
In anticipation of the wind shift.
Correct. You back down to where you think the strongest one's going to be. Otherwise, like you said, yeah, well, the wind's going to have you going this way. No, you back the boat around and tighten that line up to where the wind's supposed to
So
come.
what you're saying is even though when the boat will move around, but your anchor is set in the
Yeah, well,
direction of
Yeah,
the sail.
you're not, unless the wind, unless it's a heavy duty
Yeah.
deal, your anchor may not move at all.
Right.
You're gonna establish a direction, you pull it down, into the clay, into the mud, into the hard surface sand, it may not move at all. You know,
Wouldn't that be
even
more-
though the wind has changed direction, is like, if it doesn't pick up to something like 30 miles an hour,
Yeah, you're
probably
not-
won't ship at all.
Would that apply particularly with a dead anchor? Or, what about a rope?
Well, my rock, I set my rock down to the southwest. Now, some anchors are real good and excellent at, to come out, they just reset.
Yeah, Brockman's good at it.
Rockner does that, but I mean, so I wasn't worried about it twisting and coming out. One other thing, and it doesn't matter really whether you have chain, most people with chain have windlass, and let the wash down hose pump or whatever take care of it. If you don't, and on my Freedom, you find one of them old recycle tubs, put it on the front of your boat, under a tarp, bring everything up and just throw it in the tub. You get back to the dock in your slip and you throw it all in the water. Then you can hose it and clean it right up as you lay it out and let it dry, whether it's on the dock or on your boat. Otherwise, you're gonna have the biggest mud mess
Yeah.
up in front of your boat.
That's true.
So if you can find you a tub or something, even those round, party tubs, you put drinks in, the plastic ones with the rope handles, anything like that will definitely help when you go to bring your boat back.
Charlie, that's been real good about 4 days ago.
What's that?
That's been real good news about 4 days ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
How about a big hand for?
Feature of it. Look at that. Time is there.
You have any?